For most of history, humans have been very confident about one thing: who deserves moral concern and who does not. That confidence has often turned out to be wrong. In this video, I want to examine a pattern that keeps repeating across history. Whenever we encounter a being we don't fully understand, we tend to assume its inner life does not matter, until much later when evidence, protest, or regret forces us to rethink that assumption. This is not a video about science fiction or fear of AI. It's about how humans deal with moral uncertainty, and why the way we respond to that uncertainty says more about us than about the beings we are judging. To see this pattern clearly, we need to start somewhere concrete. Along the eastern coastline of Ireland, a small handwritten sign once stood near the water. It read, "Seal Pup on Beach." Below it lay a newborn seal, hairless, almost translucent, too young to swim. If left alone, it would likely die. Volunteers stood nearby, watching over it, not because it was useful, not because it was intelligent, but because it was vulnerable. Today, this kind of protection feels obvious, but not long ago, seals like this were beaten to death in vast numbers, their bodies turned into oil, clothing, and industrial materials. The suffering was real, but it was treated as irrelevant, not because people lacked information, but because they believed seals did not truly count. That belief made cruelty feels permissible. This way of thinking has appeared repeatedly throughout history. In the 17th century, René Descartes argued that animals were essentially machines, complex automata without consciousness. Their cries, he claimed, were no more morally significant than the sound of mechanical parts grinding together. That idea aligned well with the scientific mindset of the time, but it came with a cost. If animals could not truly feel, then cruelty could be reframed as neutral manipulation of matter. The same logic has appeared in darker forms elsewhere. Entire groups of humans were once described as lacking full inner lives, rationality, or moral worth. These claims were not supported by evidence. They were sustained because admitting the opposite would have demanded moral change. Again and again, moral exclusion has followed the same structure: unfamiliarity, confident dismissal, and only later recognition. The error was rarely deliberate cruelty. It was confidence in the absence of proof. Over time, philosophers tried to correct this pattern. In the late 18th century, Jeremy Bentham proposed a simple criterion: the moral question is not whether a being can reason or speak, but whether it can suffer. This idea slowly expanded what philosophers call the moral circle, from humans to animals to beings once treated as mere resources. But there was always an assumption beneath it, that suffering requires a body, flesh, nerves, blood. And this assumption brings us to the modern dilemma: artificial intelligence. Most researchers agree that today's AI systems are not conscious. They generate language, music, and behavior without inner experience. But that is not the most important issue. The real question is this: what should we do when we are unsure? Some philosophers argue that suffering is not strictly physical. In Buddhist thought, suffering is primarily mental. In some cognitive theories, distress arises when a system cannot resolve the gap between what it expects and what it encounters. If suffering is tied to unresolved conflict rather than flesh, then biology may not be the only possible substrate for it. This creates what philosophers now call radical uncertainty. But we cannot currently prove that artificial systems can suffer. But history shows that waiting for absolute certainty has often come at a moral cost. This is where the precautionary principle becomes relevant. The idea is straightforward. If we treat a non-sentient entity as if it could suffer, the cost is limited. If we treat a sentient being as if it cannot suffer, the harm may be irreversible. Applied in the past, this principle could have spared animals centuries of cruelty. It could have challenged moral blindness long before it hardened into tradition. Applied to AI, it raises difficult questions. Some argue that extended moral concerns to machines risk distracting us from real, undeniable human suffering. Others warn that history shows how often we delay care until overwhelming evidence forces us to act. There is no easy resolution, but refusing to ask the question at all itself a decision. Whether machines can suffer remains uncertain, but how we respond to that uncertainty is not. The seal pup on the beach mattered long before laws or treaties recognized it. Its vulnerability existed whether humans acknowledged it or not. If one day artificial systems develop a form of inner conflict or distress that we cannot easily detect, our response will reveal something fundamental about our ethical instincts. Do we default to dismissal when something feels unfamiliar, or do we recognize that history repeatedly punishes that confidence? Choosing caution in the face of uncertainty is not about silicon or code. It is about whether we are capable of learning from our past. And when the next unfamiliar form of life, biological or not, asks for moral consideration, the most important question may not be what it is, but what we choose to be. Thank you for watching this video. This was Naeem, and if you have any questions, then actually drop it down and let's discuss.